Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Imagine this. You're holding a draft of a book that is very different from the version that later becomes a global bestseller. The characters you love could have behaved completely differently, and key moments in the plot might not have existed at all. In this video, we'll explore moments from the world of Harry Potter that remained in the drafts. 1. Arthur Weasley was supposed to die. Rowling has mentioned multiple times in interviews that none of her saga's heroes die without reason or necessity. So, there were special reasons behind the planned death of Arthur Weasley. However, he is one of the few characters who literally survived by a miracle, escaping from the pen of Mama Rowe. Of course, this refers to the episode of Nagini's attack in the Department of Mysteries at the Ministry of Magic, and we remember that Arthur Weasley ultimately survived. Nevertheless, in Rowling's early drafts, there is a full description of how the head of the Weasley family dies in an uneven fight. Interestingly, Rowling had planned to present Arthur's death as an example of Voldemort's regime growing stronger based on fear and intimidation. But fortunately for the Weasley family, she ultimately abandoned this idea. If there's one character I couldn't bear to part with, it's Arthur Weasley. I think part of the reason for that is there were very few good fathers in the book. 2. The new defense against the dark arts professor was a vampire. Vampires are mentioned several times in the Harry Potter series, but they are not given much attention. However, at one point, Rowling considered introducing a character named Professor Trokar, who was supposed to teach defense against the dark arts. But the more she thought about it, the more she doubted the appropriateness of this choice. Here's what Rowling wrote about it on Pottermore. The vampire myth is so rich and has been exploited so many times in literature and on film, I felt there was little I could add to the tradition. So, instead of a vampire, a werewolf appeared in the books, and as it turned out, it was the right choice. 3. The original surname for Lucius, Narcissa, and Draco. In a sense, the name Draco Malfoy has become almost iconic. However, there was a time when Rowling wanted to give the pure-blood aristocratic family a completely different surname, Spungen. But then she thought it wasn't a great idea, as combinations like Lucius Spungen or Draco Spungen didn't sound very aristocratic and didn't evoke the image of a proper antagonist to the book's main hero. So Rowling dismissed this option and considered surnames like Smart and Spinks. The familiar pronunciation of Malfoy came much later, and it turned out to be the most fitting and successful choice. By the way, Hermione wasn't immediately a Granger either. At first, Rowling seriously considered making her Hermione Puckle. 4. Draco Malfoy's true close friend. None of Rowling's 7 books give us much information about whether Draco Malfoy had any true friends at Hogwarts. There are some hints about Blaise Zabini, but even those are mentioned briefly without further development. However, Rowling's drafts contain information that the Slytherin Theodore Nott, who studied with Draco, was supposed to be his best and closest friend. In canon, Theodore is mentioned only briefly, if I'm not mistaken, only in The Philosopher's Stone and The Order of the Phoenix. However, in an alternative version, the author intended to give him much more attention. Rowling notes that both Draco and Theodore were united by the fact that they were both sons of Death Eaters. There's even a written scene where the Notts visit Malfoy Manor and Draco and Theodore walk through the manor's park, discussing Harry Potter and Dumbledore. In fact, the two young aristocrats were supposed to form something like an alliance, building their opposition to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Rowling initially wanted Theodore to become a more prominent character, possibly even overshadowing Draco. However, she eventually abandoned this idea and reduced Nott's significance, leaving Draco as the primary Slytherin figure. 5. Mr. Granger saved Harry Potter. If you've noticed, nearly all the parents in the story play a significant role on the pages of the books. Unfortunately, Hermione's parents are mentioned only a few times and don't really influence the course of the story. However, this is quite different from Rowling's original drafts of The Philosopher's Stone. In an alternative version, the Potters live on an island, and the Grangers settle nearby on the coast. On the night Voldemort attacked Lily and James, Mr. Granger heard the screams and rushed to help the Potters. It was he who found baby Harry among the ruins and saved his life. In the original version, as we remember, this role was given to Hagrid. But can you imagine how interesting the connection between Hermione and Harry would have been? 6. Hermione's younger sister. At one point, Rowling told the BBC that she had planned to introduce Hermione's younger sister into the storyline a few years after Hermione herself started studying at Hogwarts. However, it turned out that Rowling simply forgot about her, and by the time the printed version of The Goblet of Fire was released, it became clear that introducing a new character as Hermione's sister was already too late. In general, don't you think that the original version of the Granger family is much richer than their canon counterpart? They saved Harry, sent 2 daughters to Hogwarts. There would have been plenty of room for development because surely the presence of Hermione's younger sister would have changed some events in the books. It's interesting to wonder if she would have been part of the Golden Trio. Or maybe she would have been very different from her older sister and followed her own path. We will never know the answers to these questions now. 7. The death of Ron Weasley. This is something, according to Rowling herself, that fans would never have forgiven her for. Nevertheless, such a twist could have happened because I planned from the start that none of them would die, but then midway through, which I think is a reflection of the fact that I wasn't in a very happy place, I started thinking I might polish one of them off, out of sheer spite. The author admits that at that moment in her life, much seemed dark to her, and this inevitably found its reflection in the book, which she had already been working on for quite some time. However, deep down, she always knew she could never actually go through with it, which is why Ron safely lived to the final pages of the book. By the way, Rupert Grint, who played Ron Weasley, once admitted that he was a little nervous while reading the last Harry Potter books, as he wasn't entirely sure his character would survive in the end. 8. An imperfect Weasley relative in Slytherin. Of course, we associate the Weasleys only with Gryffindor, but can you imagine that in Rowling's drafts there was a character named Mafalda, who was the daughter of Molly Weasley's cousin, who was probably a squib, and his muggle-born wife. The author planned to introduce this character in The Goblet of Fire. It's noted that Molly didn't particularly like Mafalda because she was quite an unpleasant person. Mafalda ends up in Slytherin and becomes a fierce rival to Hermione, showing great diligence and talent in her studies. Initially, the relationship between Mafalda and the Golden Girl was not going to be the best, but Rowling planned a new plot twist where at some point the Slytherin girl passes on important information about the Death Eaters to Harry, Ron and Hermione, which she overheard in the Slytherin common room. After that, she becomes an ally and friend, turning the trio into a quartet. Rowling admits that she became very fond of this character and initially didn't want to remove Mafalda from the storyline, but in the end she did so, feeling that Mafalda would have stolen too much attention as she was shaping up to be a very colourful character. It's a pity, as it would have been interesting to see how Mafalda would compete with Hermione in academics. 9. Professor Mopsus, the divination teacher. This character is one of those whom Rowling had to remove because his presence would have had too much impact on the overall narrative. Mopsus possessed a very strong gift of clairvoyance and could have predicted key events in the heroes' lives which would have altered the course of the story, for example, Voldemort's attack. However, this character did not disappear without a trace. Some of his traits are reflected in Alastair Moody and Sybil Trelawney. 10. The original form of Voldemort's Horcrux. We all remember well Voldemort's 7 Horcruxes and his nearly obsessive desire to turn relics of the Hogwarts founders into Horcruxes. Salazar Slytherin's locket, Rowena Ravenclaw's diadem, and Helga Hufflepuff's cup. However, the last item didn't always have the appearance we're used to. Initially, instead of a cup, Rowling planned to make it a small cauldron. But later, she realized that a cauldron was too bulky and not very aesthetic, and it wouldn't be very convenient to destroy later, so she decided to replace it with a more delicate cup. 11. The final words. According to the author, she spent quite a bit of time trying to come up with the final words with which the story would end. At one point, she wanted the final word of the work to be scar. But why exactly scar? I wanted a very concrete statement that Harry won, and that the scar, although it's still there, is now just a scar. The idea overall is interesting and logical, as it creates a kind of symbolic loop and allows the story to end on a very positive note. However, all was well also sounds very hopeful and helps to feel the happy moment in the characters' lives. Interestingly, some fans have noted that this ending also gives the feeling that the story might not be completely over and that a continuation may be in store. 12th chapter, from Draco Malfoy's perspective. J.K. Rowling once considered showing events through the eyes of one of the most controversial characters in Harry Potter, Draco Malfoy. This idea could have drastically changed how his role in the story was perceived. We are used to seeing the world through Harry's eyes, but what if at least one chapter was told from the perspective of his enemy? Perhaps we would have seen Draco not only as an arrogant heir to an ancient family, but as a person forced to live under the pressure of his family's and society's expectations. From the very beginning, Malfoy is portrayed as Harry's antagonist. He's rich, spoiled, and emphasizes his superiority while showing disdain for Muggle-born wizards. However, by The Half-Blood Prince, Rowling begins to reveal his complex inner world. Draco is no longer shown as a self-confident boy, but as a young man unwillingly caught in a situation where his family's lives are at stake. In the scene where he stands in the room of requirement, desperately trying to fix the vanishing cabinet, his hands are shaking and he is clearly terrified. This is the very moment when Rowling could have opened up his thoughts to us. Writing a chapter from Draco's point of view would have given readers a chance to understand that his actions weren't just displays of anger or arrogance, they were the result of fear and pressure. He is tasked with carrying out Voldemort's orders, but he knows this could lead to the deaths of not only himself, but also his parents. There's a crucial moment in the text. "I didn't want this. I had no choice," he confesses to Dumbledore. This phrase shows just how deeply he's entangled in a world where he cannot control his own fate. Many Slytherin fans would have been thrilled with a chapter told from his perspective. The house, often depicted as a haven for cunning and ambition, could have been shown from a different angle through Draco. After all, not all Slytherins are evil. They simply strive for success at any cost, as Malfoy does. If the chapter had been written from his perspective, it would have helped fans see how Draco tries to balance loyalty to his family and fear of what is demanded of him. It would also highlight the theme of morality and choice, which runs throughout the series. Moreover, we could have learned more about his relationships with other characters, such as Severus Snape and Bellatrix Lestrange. Severus, in particular, could have been a key figure in this chapter. Draco respects him, but Snape is also in a difficult situation, trying to protect young Malfoy. This would have been a deep psychological moment that could have revealed Snape's complex feelings as well. After all, as we know, he keeps his true motives hidden until the very end. But Rowling decided against this idea. Why? Perhaps it was important for her to keep the focus on the main characters, Harry, Ron, and Hermione. The entire plot revolves around their interactions, their fight against Voldemort, and their coming of age. Shifting the focus to Draco might have distracted attention from the central storyline. Despite the interest in Malfoy, Harry remained the heart of the story, and this required maintaining his perspective as the primary one. Another reason might have been to maintain the mystery around Draco. Even if readers understood that he was suffering and struggling, the lack of his inner voice made his character more closed and ambiguous. We see his actions but don't know his thoughts, which creates additional tension in the plot. If we had understood his motives right away, it might have weakened the intrigue. 13. Dudley's Son A Wizard. Dudley Dursley could have been the father of a wizard. In an early epilogue, J.K. Rowling planned that his son would receive a letter from Hogwarts. Imagine this scene. Dudley at platform 9 3/4, standing alongside the Potters and Weasleys, seeing his child off to Hogwarts. How would this have changed the Dursley family? The magic they so despised would have become part of their lives. Vernon Dursley hated magic with all his heart. But his grandson being a wizard would be the ultimate irony. Imagine Vernon, who forbade even mentioning magic, having to come to terms with the fact that his own blood is connected to the magical world. This would have been a blow to his pride, but also a moment of incredible comedic tension. Dudley began to change in the Deathly Hallows. He sincerely said goodbye to Harry, saying, "I don't think you're a waste of space." This was his first acknowledgement that he was wrong. If his son had turned out to be a wizard, it would have shown how much Dudley had grown. He would have become a symbol of reconciliation between the worlds that he and his parents once hated. Sending his son to platform 9 3/4, Dudley could have become part of the magical world. For him, this would have been a huge step. He would have accepted magic for the sake of his child, even if his parents still despised it. For the first time in the history of the Dursley family, magic would no longer be the enemy. Now imagine Vernon's face. Standing on the platform, grim-faced, watching his grandson disappear into the wall, heading to Hogwarts. For a man who had spent years avoiding everything related to magic, this would have been a real shock. But the scene would have been incredibly funny. However, Rowling decided otherwise. She left the Dursleys as muggles. Vernon was too stubborn. His genes didn't allow magic to break through. This preserved their role in the story as a family always alien to the magical world. The Dursleys stayed true to their roots, despite the changes in Dudley's character. 14. The character of Mopsy. Mopsy could have been one of the most unusual characters in Harry Potter. Imagine Sirius Black, hiding in the form of a black dog, meets her. Mopsy is a dog lover. She isn't afraid of him, but offers him shelter. In a world full of cat lovers like Mrs. Figg and Dolores Umbridge, finally, there would be someone who loves dogs. This could have added a fresh, warm moment to the story. In Sirius's life, full of dangers, such a meeting could have been a ray of light. We know how hard it was for him to stay in hiding, surviving on scraps. But Mopsy could have changed that. She would not only have given him food, but also a chance to feel safe. Their friendship could have been an unexpected yet important element of the plot. Mopsy could have also expanded the magical world. She could have been either a muggle or a witch. In any case, her lack of fear of a magical creature like Sirius in dog form would have shown that not all muggles fear magic. This would have brought a new, kinder perspective on the relationship between the worlds. However, this scene was cut. The editor decided that it wasn't significant to the main plot. There was already enough focus on Sirius. An additional character might have distracted from the main story. Although Mopsy could have added depth to Sirius' story, her absence didn't drastically affect the overall plot. Still, if Mopsy had remained, she could have symbolized kindness and acceptance. Her love for dogs would have resonated with Sirius's nature, wild but loyal. She would have seen him not as a fugitive criminal, but as an animal in need of care. This would have been a strong, touching moment. And though we didn't see her, the idea of Mopsy remains interesting. She could have been someone who brought more warmth, kindness, and light into the world of Harry Potter. 15. The importance of ice cream vendor Florian Fortescue. Florian Fortescue, the owner of the ice cream parlor in Diagon Alley, could have played an important role in the plot. Originally, Rowling planned for him to help Harry and his friends uncover the secrets of the Elder Wand and Ravenclaw's diadem. Imagine, a seemingly ordinary ice cream vendor turns out to be the keeper of ancient knowledge. This would have added an unexpected twist to the story. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry frequently visits Fortescue's parlor. Florian seems kind, a little strange, but nothing more. However, Rowling intended for him to play a larger role, passing important information to Harry. A seemingly harmless ice cream vendor suddenly becomes the key to solving the greatest mysteries of the magical world. This would have made Fortescue even more interesting. We are used to significant characters being people like Dumbledore or the Lovegoods. But if a random ice cream vendor had turned out to be the keeper of secrets, it would have added mystery and surprise to the story. In the magical world, nothing is as simple as it seems. Even the most ordinary people can be important. But Rowling decided otherwise. The information about the Elder Wand and Ravenclaw's diadem was ultimately passed on by the Lovegoods. This was a logical decision, given their deep connection to ancient magic. Luna and her father Xenophilius fit more naturally into this plotline. Fortescue remained just an ice cream vendor. Thank you for watching to this point. I hope this means you found it interesting, and if so, don't forget to like, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel.